Strangely strange but oddly normal.
Hi, my name's John Downs and welcome to the Weird Weekend.
Thank you. Adam Davies has recently been banned from the Manchester branch of Thompson's Travel Agents after a sheep-stroke-mallet incident. He's travelled all the way up from Grub Street to be with us today, and his talk is entitled Caution! Planning Permission Breach at the DIY Centre.
I don't know what any of that was about, but thanks very much, Richard. Right, good afternoon everyone, and thanks very much for attending this talk. As you know, my name's Adam Davies. I'm going to talk to you about Makili Mbembe, the Congo dinosaur. Just by way of introduction, obviously the Congo is in Central Africa, and the Makili swampland lies in the north of the country, with the capital Brazzaville to the south. This talk is going to primarily talk about the expeditions that I've conducted and some conclusions about Makili Mbembe at the end. Any questions, I'm more than happy to answer at the end. But I want you to get a feel of the Congo today. I want you to understand it. You've probably read a bit about it, but I want you to get under its skin. So can we cue the music, please? Don't worry about the camera angles on this. This is of the pygmies. Da, da, da. Otherwise you'll have me singing. I'll tell you the whole pretty quickly if that happens. Now, those are the pygmies who operate in the Lake Tele region, and I'll talk more about them later. But I want you to understand that in the Congo, there's a lot of spiritualism, there's a lot of tribal tradition, and music is a very important part of people's lives. Now, those pygmies, some of the ones you just saw on the video, claim to have seen the Makili Mbembe. What I want to do now, first of all, is give you a little bit of history. Most of you will know some of this, but for those of you who don't, I think it's useful. Reports of belief in a Congo dinosaur-like creature in the Congo date back to the early attempts of European nations to carve out their respective empires. In the last 30 years, there have been several notable expeditions to Bikula and Lake Tele, the focus of so many legends about dinosaur survival. Herman Augustus, Dr. Roy Mackle of the University of Chicago have all hunted for the creature, as has Bill Gibbons, who I've spoken to, who some of you will know, Redmond O'Hanlon, allegedly, and more recently an American journalist, Rory Nugent. Bill's also been to Cameroon in the last couple of years. However, it was Macau who fired my imagination, and his attempts at erecting a hammock on Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World series made me laugh. I mean, I thought if he could do that, so could I. I'm no Sir Randolph Fiennes. Yeah, I've been all over the world doing all sorts of expeditions, anything from Mongolia, where I was last year, to the Congo. You name it, I've been there. But I'm an ordinary guy like you. I'm just driven. Probably like most of you. The first time I went to the Congo, I had to get out pretty quickly. At the time, there were no flights into Brazzaville, and I landed in Kinshasa just at the verge of the coup when Laurent Kabila was being overthrown. And there was an evacuation then of all non-nationals. After spending several thousand quid of my own money, I had to return home. Not before I'd had to run a gauntlet in Kinshasa, being shot at, and I actually had a rocket launcher pointed at my head at the airport. I don't know what the guy was thinking he was going to do, you know, that was it, but there we are. So it's a pretty unpleasant experience. I'm just warning you of all of this before you think, oh, I'll listen to that nice man, I think I'll go to the Congo for my summer holidays, yeah? Don't want any of you to do that before we carry on. Not least unless you've spoken to me first. So I saved up my cash again, and all the more determined I set off again, a couple of years later, this time better prepared, better researched as well. One thing I learned from my experience in Kinshasa is you just can't wing it. The Congolese system is based on the French model with local playfairs. Bill Gibbons, for example, some of you will know, got stuck in Brazzaville for a month while he waited for necessary permits. I sent a friend of mine, Jack Beacon, to the Congo to organise it all in advance. He can speak all the different languages, made a big difference. Can we have the next slide of the airport, please? This is the airport. I can't actually believe that these guys let me take this photograph, but I'm really glad they did. So some of these are the famous ninjas, by the way, who many of you will heard of, who were running the place until not long ago. You do see the odd lad as well with an AK-47. I've got an 8-year-old son, I can see some children in the audience. It's a bit worrying when you see kids who are a few years older than your own child with a gun. But a lot of that's been eradicated. I've got lots of positive things to say about the Congo as well. There's some fantastic people, and I want you to understand that too. If you just, next slide please. This is a photograph of Brazzaville across to Kinshasa, along the River Congo. I just want you to sort of get a feel of the area. It's really important to me that you understand. There's a lot of academic stuff about dinosaurs and Makila Remember. I want to bring home to you the realities of what it's like to actually do these expeditions. I found Brazzaville quite fine to wander around at night. Although you can hear the odd blast of gunfire across the city, it wasn't really much different to Manchester, where I'm from. Actually, it's a diversion. When I came down to Devon, I thought, oh, it's great here, Devon. I thought, I'll bring some trunks, like summer holidays. Naturally, mine were bulletproof because I am from Manchester. We got diverted at Barometer World, and no village. We didn't make it. Okay. Now, in Brazzaville, it was here that I met Marcel McNana. Anyone who's come across Redland and Hannon's book, Congo Journey, will know of Marcel McNana. He kept us waiting for hours. Yeah, it's all this custom and stuff like that. And one of the reasons he was keeping us waiting for hours is because he was dressing up with his gold watches and stuff like that. And what McNana has, is he had a picture of the old president on the wall and the new president, and it was behind his desk. So what he'd do is when they changed presidents, he'd swap the pictures depending on who was in power. but it's a very interesting guy, and I couldn't afford to take him to the jungle. I only wish I had more money because I would have done. But I got some interesting information from him. He's the minister responsible for forests. And he was very clear in his descriptions of a brontosaurus-like creature. He personally said he'd seen the creature. Now, at the end of my talk, I want to talk about objective evidence, scientific, because it's really important to me. But so you have to take everything McNana says with a pinch of salt. I don't mean that disrespectfully, but I'm always suspicious of people who say, well, I was about to take a photograph of it, but just then my camera failed. I'm sure we've heard it. But he did. One thing he got very passionate about was he showed me the map of Tele, and he pointed to a spot south of Lake Tele, where I was to learn later two main rivers meet in an old hunter's camp. That was where he'd seen it, and that's what some of the locals say later on. He also spoke of another lake, and this is the place I'm going to go to next, called Lake Makile, and he said that was where there was a much better chance of seeing the Makile, remember, and it's only a couple of kilometres from Lake Tele. There's maybe one or two regularly at Tele. They all live at Makile. After, can we have the slide of the food? Now, while we were in Brazzaville, before I went off to Mfondo, we obviously had some interesting food. And anybody who's done expeditions, Richard and Chris and I, can see us all talked about this. Any children in the audience? Got a little girl there. Can anyone tell me what that is? This here. Sorry? Anybody any idea? No? Those are caterpillars. I wouldn't recommend them. Definitely not on toast anyway. I ate some bizarre things. I ate some absolutely bizarre things. For example, Richard will tell you, in Sumatra, they serve the chicken heads. Where are the rest of the chickens? You know, where does it go? I think it's really important that you sample and respect what local people eat. So never turn down a meal if you go to any of these places. Some of the things I ate in Mongolia last year for National Geographic, I never ate any part of a creature that wasn't either its offal or its genitalia. I don't know whether they were reserving it for me, but I never turned down a meal. I think it's very important. Most of the time, locals eat fruits and manioc and things like that, and these are kind of a treat. Next slide, please. Brazzaville, when I was there, was in a state of repair after the Civil War. That's the old Elf building, and you can actually see some of the bullet holes and some of the windows have been shot out. But, as I say, I found it quite safe to wander around at night, and I found the people extremely generous and respectful and keen to rebuild their country. They couldn't do enough more for me. The bureaucracy's hard work, but the people were fantastic. If we just leave that one second. After Brazzaville, I flew to Infondo, and this place, I noticed the Baggy River, had something of a frontier feel about it. At night, a yellow glow of shells lit up the night sky. It was here that I met some remarkable people, Dr. Joe Harvey and Paul Olin, missionaries. Whatever you think about Christianity, whether you believe in it or not, I have to admire their courage. Disease was all around them, and I personally helped to the hospital, and it was one of the most moving experiences of my life. I felt completely humble in these people's eyes. They were bringing a family up in horrendous conditions. I had one of the weirdest experiences I ever had was standing by a Christmas tree, filming it while we were singing Silent Night, because just before Christmas, it was like desperate to get home. Singing Silent Night around this Christmas tree, as we could hear Kalashnikov fire getting nearer and nearer to us, and we'd start to sing it louder to try and drown out the gunfire. And these people were bringing a family up there. Joe Harvey and his partner had died of malaria. Extraordinary people. And when you do go on these expeditions, I'm sure you'll meet extraordinary people too. So respect them. These are pygmies. These are some of the pygmies that you saw in the film. I love this lady here. She was fantastic. She's got teeth which are sharpened into points as part of their local tradition. Every time I try to get a photograph of her, she'd be smiling all the time like this. Try to get a photograph of her and it'd be like, every time. But she was a marvellous person. Now, the pygmies have a lot of traditions about them, and for them it's a very real creature. And people who are very sceptical about the sort of thing that we do, they hear stories of mystical and they just dismiss them. If they hear a story about one of these creatures, for example, with the pygmies, you would dismiss it because the pygmy legends say that it shoots lightning from its eyes. So if you were extremely sceptical, you might say, well, that's clearly a load of rubbish. But the bottom line is what they also do is give very practical advice of what it eats, how it moves through the Sangha and the Bai, and genuinely believe that it's a real creature. You get very irritated if you say anything other. So when you're analysing these things, I think it's important to have regard to the mysticism, but don't, because somebody gives a mystical story, look for the truth. There's always a core of truth within it. Look for the core of truth and see how that can have a practical scientific explanation and how that can be plausible. Don't just dismiss something simply because it seems fanciful. Go to the bottom of it because you're dealing with tribal people. Obviously, I interviewed a number of pygmies, and I asked Paul Olin to translate for me because he can speak back a pygmy. And basically, the pygmies said they drew a picture of a brontosaurus-like creature. There's some more pygmies there. And they're extremely musical people, by the way. Their culture is all musical and signifies music. Let me just show the picture that they drew. And that's the sort of basic picture that they can draw in the dirt. And I saw that picture consistently. Just pull it down a bit. Thanks. Okay, next slide, please. After I went to Infondo, I moved on to Apina. Now, this is my transport to Apina. This is a transport I shared with, I think that's actually a rucksack on one of our rucksacks as well. This is actually a transport I shared with lots and lots of people. As you can see, that's everybody's bum stuck out there. I'm in the middle of all of those people with a monkey on my knee. The entire direction I had a monkey, and it sat on my knee, took a shine to me, and I enjoyed playing with the monkey. I was to regret it later, but I'll tell you why, but I enjoyed it. The Pygmies also warned me about the villages of Boa, as did Agnana, and they've got a bad reputation. Now, Boa is the gatekeeper village to Tele. I say gatekeeper village, it's actually about 50 or 60 kilometres, but it's the nearest village to Tele, and they regard Tele as theirs. And everyone has said, oh, you've got to be careful of these villages, and oh. But I have to say, they were fantastic. They were very helpful, and they too were surrounded with mysticism about the Makila member. Just a quick word on their society, because again I think this is interesting for you to sort of grasp what you might face if you go do this. Their society is divided into two halves. One is a notable drawn from a village, and they're sort of the aristocracy. These are notables here. You see those spears? And they are inherited. And they are the keepers of tradition, and those are the sort of people that I knocked about with because I was interested in the local customs. On the other side, you've got an elected official who's a chief. He's elected for 5 years. And really, they were hugely helpful. They use those spears for hunting crocodiles, by the way, which they eat. The notables are the old family heads of the Tele region. And as I say, it was them that I spent most of my time with. It was, one of the most interesting things was that it almost seemed like a rite of passage for young men to see the creature. It was extremely important. Young notables were always desperate to see it. The head notable I found a fascinating individual with an engaging personality who claimed to have seen the Makila member many times. Here's a direct translation, because I wrote it all down, of what he said about the Makila member. He described it like this. It has feet like an elephant and a neck like a giraffe. It does not live in the lake, but in the forest. And that's important, we'll talk about that in a minute. It travels across the lake for food. And again, he drew the same sort of picture as the Pygmies and Agnana. And the other detail that he added in his experience was that the male had a horn on its head, while the female didn't. After we left Boa, we got some of the local guides, and we trekked up to the lake itself. Just leave that one sec. The trek was made more arduous than usual because the tracks were flooded, and the vegetation itself offered little consolation. What is it about the jungle, and Richard will understand what I mean about this, where everything that you feel like you want to grab is full of thorns? You know, you just go to grab something and it's always chocker with thorns. Every time. There's nothing soft there. On the way as well, one of the things that when you travel through the jungle, one of the things that's really important is you normally have a wet and a dry kit. So everything gets wet when you're wearing it, and at night you change into your dry kit so you can chill out in your tent, or if you're sleeping in one of the local quarters, in that. Just as I got to Tele, just before I got to Tele, there's a 3 kilometre stretch up to Tele, which is just horrible. I've done mountaineering, I've climbed, but it's got to be one of the worst things I've ever done this last 3 kilometres. I was exhausted, one of the nails was dropping off on my toes, I had these sweat beads that were like biting me all the time, stinging me. So I got there, and I went to take off my wet kit. So go to take off my wet kit, take it off, get into my dry kit, chill out. Next morning, go to get my wet kit on, and I think, oh no, where's my boxer shorts? Go back to the place where I got to change, and termites had started to build a nest on my boxer shorts. So what I realised was that like, there's somewhere in the Congo now there's like a big nest of termites built entirely on my pants. And one of the other things, and do forgive me about this, is that when you're in the jungle, as I said, it's very important to respect local traditions and local customs. Now, the locals do eat monkey. It's a tradition there, and when they're hungry, they will eat it. For our Christmas dinner, that was what we had. So, you know, it doesn't always bode well, monkey, and I think when it was my work to do it, I was actually tucking into monkey and manioc, while everyone else was having turkey. It was good stuff.
Did they use strapping?
There's a child in the audience. If you want to see me afterwards, I'll tell you exactly what they did use. But I'm conscious and I've been told not to say anything. Anything. But there is actually a story behind it, and I'm happy to share with you. Now, I'm sure you want to know what telly looks like, because I don't think I've ever seen any photos apart from that grainy Japanese effort. Do you want to show? This is telly. This is where the Makilima member is said to live. God, it's so beautiful. That's what I'd say to you. It's absolutely astounding. When I got there, I was completely exhausted, as I said. Absolutely worn out. Now, I sat at telly, looking up, and this carpet of butterflies landed on me, if you can imagine. As I'm looking up, this carpet of butterflies landed on me. I can look at this, and on the top of the trees, I see a gorilla picking its nose, watching me. You know? What a buzz! If you're thinking about doing expeditions, go and do them. I'll never forget that as long as I live. You'll forget your trip to Tenerife, I tell you. Do it. The lake, for those of you who are interested in the research aspects of the Makilima member, and a couple of people have emailed me with questions and things like this. I think it's important that I mention this. Telly has a genuinely primeval feel to it. Kochik is completely right when he said before, you know, it's unchanged for millions of years. Well, I've been there, and it really has seemed to not change for millions of years. It does have rivers and tributaries surrounding it, and they do flow into the bay, but it's very shallow. Most of the lake itself, when you go in, it's like having a warm bath almost. It goes up to about there. There's one main channel through it, which is quite deep, which is sort of towards the centre of the lake. Now, I don't think that a Makilima member, there's no way a Makilima member could be a purely aquatic animal. It has to be a scavenger in the swampland, on that basis, on a practical basis. Did I find it? I had one adrenaline-fueled chase across the lake, but I didn't see it. Or I'll say so. If I see something, I'll tell you. If I don't see something, I'll tell you that too. It's really important credibility in cryptozoology, as I'm sure you're all aware. I also went to the old pygmy camp, where one had allegedly been killed, and those who ate its flesh had died. But if you ever go, it is one of the most astounding and breathtaking places. Could you get to the next slide, please? Look at this for a sunset. Now, when I'm tucking into my, when I've got my cuts from my sweat beads and things like that, that sort of takes it all away, you know. You really remember that.
Can I just ask, how big is the lake?
It's, off the top of my head, it's 8 by 5 kilometres. But I can specifically tell you when I've got it. I think I've got a map of it somewhere. But I've got a pencil drawing of it. When we got back to Boa, we got a hero's reception. We drank this stuff called Whiskey of the Village when we got back, because they had a big party, as you can see, as the kids had a party. I can tell you now, whiskey of the village tastes absolutely nothing like any whiskey I ever drunk. It wasn't even like that dodgy scrumpy we drank in Turkey last night. I'll tell you, it tastes like diesel, and it smells worse, but boy did I have a skinful when I got back from that lake. So, it was great. As we were walking into the village, everybody cheers us, and it was a hero's reception. I'm not a big believer in mysticism, and that's not because I don't respect other people's beliefs in mysticism. I want you to understand some of that. I know some of you really do love that sort of thing. It's purely my own view, but I do respect it. I was brought up by a hippie mother. I couldn't not. I just very, very slightly escaped something my friend answered just by being called Star or something. It was that close. But one of the weirdest things happened to me when I was there. As I got into the pirogue to leave, I shook the notable's hand. My guide pushed the boat off and we started to drift away. He said, "Adam, you've earned my permission to return and you will go to Lake Teller next time." As I got into the pirogue, I shook his hand, and I said, "Well, forgive me, I can't promise you I'll be back." And he said, "You will be back. It's your destiny." So strange, and it was like a certainty thing. It was like saying, "I'll see you in the pub tomorrow night," And if you'd said to me, even in the last couple of years, "You're going back," and I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that again. I do other stuff, But now I'm actually starting to think about it. I'm starting to think about going back and going to Makile. This is what I look like at the end, just so you know. Looking a bit rough, eh? Look at that. That's my shirt, ripped as I come back through the jungle, and you can see them. So that was why there was some reservation there. Now, have I got definite evidence that the Makina member exists? No. Do I believe it exists? Yes. I spoke to a number of credible people who, just so you know, as an aside, in my full-time job I work for the Home Office. I'm not a nutter, and I do spend most of my days cross-examining people. That's what I do for a living. I can fairly quickly make an assessment as to credibility, because that's what I do every day. But, as I said to you, I do expeditions all over the world. I was in Mongolia. It was great to hear Gregory talk earlier on. I was in Mongolia looking for the owls last year. In 2 weeks' time, I'm off to do a documentary, and I'm going to look for the orang pendek again. And I've found scientific evidence that exists, some of you may know. I'm backed by a primatologist at Cambridge, and also by Hans Brunner, who did the Dingo Baby case, who analysed the hair samples. So we've got it, but what I'd say to you is, you people are really important to carry this on. You're the people who are going to go out and do expeditions in the future. I'm firmly of the opinion that there are some very special, unique creatures in remote parts of the world, places I've been, and I've spoken to the locals, and I'm gathering scientific evidence. But what we really need is scientific evidence that can be rigorously and independently tested. That's what will make the difference. That's why it's important that you lot go out and do these things, get yourself some scientific testing, and let's prove these things exist. The Congo's very special, but it's very close to being eaten away by corrupt loggers and people who want that sort of area for financial gain. Lots of people try their best efforts to protect it in the Congo, but money talks. The same in places like Sumatra. So I'm doing my best. If you're interested in doing other expeditions, do let me know. But I hope that there's somebody sat in the audience now who's listened to what I've said and said, "I'd like to go to, I'm inspired." If you are, come and talk to me. That's all, ladies and gentlemen. I'll take some questions. Thank you very much. Now, as I say, I've been all over the world, I've looked for all sorts of things. If anybody's got any questions about the Congo or any other creature or hominid that I've looked for, then do let me know. I can't really see, so do let me know.
Not sure if you're blind. It's really courageous of you to do these expeditions.
Just, well, as I say, I had my nail drop off my. I've had all sorts of things go wrong with me. There's always something, you know. I always come back a bit. My mother got terribly worried when I went the first time. She said, "Oh my boy, she's going to stuff it now." She's like, I said, "Mum, I'm going to some marker in a couple of weeks' time." She's like, "Yeah, good luck, son. You know, people get blasé about these things, don't they?" But thank you very much for saying that. It does. I don't want just anybody to go, but that's what I'm saying to you. It's important that you do your research before you go, and people like me. No, but there are different things you can do. I wouldn't recommend, if that's how you feel about yourself, I wouldn't recommend. No. You can go to places like Mongolia to look for the animals. A lot of the stuff there is in a jeep, and I can talk to you about the practical points of what you can do there. You don't have to go running wading through swamps. There are certain things you can do depending on your physical limitations.
Which are many and varied. A more serious question. You mentioned this character who told you that the Fortean Zoology lived on land and ventured into the water. Now, those who have denied it could be a sauropod dinosaur have said in the past, we now know that sauropod dinosaurs didn't stay in the water. This would tie in very well with that.
Yeah, it would. I mean, I've wondered what it is. I mean, obviously I've spent a lot of time wondering what it is because I risked my life to look for it twice. You know, when people say dinosaurs, when you're talking to an uneducated audience, people say dinosaurs, say, this loony, he thinks he's looking for a Tyrannosaurus Rex or something, some pterodactyl. What a lot of these creatures are is they have scientific foundation and plausibility. It could be. I hope so. That's what I'd like it to be most of all. But yes, it's plausible or possible.
How likely is it that you could have a, I mean obviously the presumption must be you think it is likely that you could have a viable breeding population, but if it's not primarily aquatic based, right, if it's something that lives primarily on the land, having been there, you know the layout of the place, how difficult or easy would it be for, say, a viable breeding population to exist with a minimal amount of contact with human beings?
Well, it would be very easy. The area, the Kula, is roughly the size of Switzerland. Very few people have penetrated it. As far as I know, the photographs and the films that you've seen, as I say, apart from that Japanese size, are the only ones that have ever been shown. And that video up there has more stuff in it. But some of it's got me singing Manchester United songs to the local, so I had to sort of edit it because I knew the different football teams supported it. But yes, it's one of the last places. When I go to, as Richard, when I go to Sumatra, I'm really conscious of the area being squeezed ecologically. But there's a lot of logging interests out there, mate, I tell you, and they're desperate, and they want it. Yes?
First of all, for reptiles is not usual but possible parthenogenesis. So the size of population is maybe not so large. And the second, there were very many sauropods, and maybe some of them may live in water, some in wood, as elephant and hippopotamus, for example. But as for me, that's my question. I'm sure that Dinosaur and especially sauropod. It seems to me that sauropod is the most unsuitable dinosaur for living in modern times. There was very primitive dinosaurs. They almost died in Jura, anywhere except South America, where they were not the same.
Yeah, no, the question of what it is isn't decided, and I totally respect your opinion. I don't think people can be sure. That's why it's important that we get evidence that's rigorously tested so we can prove what it is and solve the mystery. But thank you, David. Yes?
It's now fairly well established, I think, that many dinosaurs have
No, of course not.
And they could have evolved into more compact dinosaurs. And it's not being this age, sort of diminutive dinosaurs.
Hmm.
I'm not suggesting that sort of really,
No, I understand.
I mean, if they step from you like but they would be smaller than your average brontosaurus. So you could put it that way.
No, absolutely. I mean, when you talk about dwarfism, just let me touch on 2 points. Brendan O'Hanlon's book speculated that the Killing Member was an elephant, some of you will know. The locals to completely refute that and say that's absolute rubbish. It's like us saying that we don't know what a squirrel looks like. Yes, and it is possible if you look at, for example, Flora's man. The gentleman right at the back, and I'll work my way down until Richard tells me to shut up. Gentleman right at the back.
Yeah, just to lay that point, if this thing was a sauropod, or so it is, we have to bear in mind that we don't have any fossils for any sauropod or non-avian dinosaur, any earlier than 65 million years ago. So we have an awful lot of evolutionary time to tweak with the sauropod design and get something compact enough to live in a forest-type setting. And also the Congo contains many animals that we wouldn't necessarily associate with a dense jungle setting, things like elephants and large antelope and things. So it's quite possible that you could have a large animal that you wouldn't intuitively expect to live in a forest environment. But my question to you is just, you mentioned that some of the pygmies gave descriptions of what this animal was like in terms of its behaviour, what it ate, and so can you elaborate on any of those details for us?
Well, yeah, without looking, most of it's primarily, very briefly, because I can't go into too much detail now, but I'm going to have to talk to you about more detail, but it's primarily vegetarian, but it is an opportunist feeder. The pygmies, one of the main pygmy stories, pygmy legends, is that there was, when they actually killed one, there was a male and a female, they pair off in male-female groups where they seem to bond primarily for life. And as I said, the male is supposed to have a horn and the female not have one. But I'll talk to you more about it later if you need more detail. Yes?
You mentioned the man had a horn. I don't know if you saw it. There was a program a little while ago where a gentleman came out to the Congo and he took pictures with him and he showed them a photo of a rhinoceros. And apparently the villagers, on TV, identified it as the Nigerian rhinoceros.
Yeah, I know about that because that was the BBC's Congo, and they asked me a lot of questions about that, and so a lot of the research that they used was the information that I gave them. So yes, I do. One of the speculations is that it's that when we talk about compact dinosaurs and things, and just to add to the point I should have mentioned to the gentleman at the back, there's been speculation about whether it could be a water type of rhinoceros or something, but we're obviously not sure. Yes, I'll come on to you, sweetie pie. Just give me 1 second, I'll talk to this gentleman.
Personally, the more you say about it, the less I think it's a sauropod. Personally, because the sauropods seem to go extinct sometime before the case of boundary in the old world. They stayed on in South America, but they went extinct in Africa and Eurasia. And then you say that it's in Japan. The male has horn on its head. Dinosaurs didn't usually appear to Japan. And it's not too speedy. It's a sauropod that has sauropod type teeth. It would be a vegetarian specialist. But it's looking more and more like a mammal of some sort. So they can both be
I'm not convinced about mammal. Let me say right now, I think it exists. And it's always been referred to as a dinosaur, as you can tell from my talk. I'm a field researcher, so what I like to do is present the evidence to be scientifically analysed. I didn't come away feeling it was definitely a sauropod type dinosaur. If you're asking me to pin my money on what I think it most likely is a subvariant of the rhinoceros, like a water rhinoceros. That's what I think most likely I had to gamble money on. But until we get any definitive evidence, I couldn't be sure. No. They respect it. It's regarded as the single most important animal amongst all of them. As I said, it's a rite of passage to see one. It's not just surrounded by mysticism, but it's also revered. No, probably not. On reflection, that's a good point. No, it's a good point.
It's also not known as very
Well, let me just ask this little girl's been waiting really patiently. Yes. looking for expeditions. Cool. I've done expeditions now for about 10 years, and I've done probably one or two every year. I love doing it. Yeah, it's fantastic. As I said to you, if I could do it full time, I would. But unlike John, I've not managed to find a way, and Richard, I've not managed to find a way to pay my bills to do it. But I'd love to do it. And you know, if you want to go and do it, I've heard John's been saying it. You've been asking lots of intelligent questions all day long. If you want to go and do it,
I'll tell you what, Adam, you don't need to be fake. I have no idea how I do it. But something I know people sound like old kidding, they can. If you're doing something for the right reasons, the money comes in, and I don't know where it comes from. Like, Krishna provides, the stuff just happens. Any more questions, Ryan? Peter first, and then there's something out there I can't do it.
Before we start, I just wanted to show you this is a pygmy hunting gun, so if you bring it along.
You're having pygmies with that?
No! This is, I'm going to talk about microphones because this is the sort of thing that they use to cut through the forest. Again, it's just to sort of get a feel of it. You can see it's weighted at the end. I've actually used this, it actually works really well, better than the normal apps as well. So this is like their technology, it's superb on them. I just want to show you that while we're waiting.
Come on, give them the third hand.
In terms of fulfilling a goal that you set for yourself, for establishing the reality of a extinct animal, an animal out of place, what has been your greatest success, your most successful expedition in your estimation?
I love that question. Can I just use that one so I can answer?
right. What have I found so far? The single biggest thing I found was in Sumatra, and that's 2 questions. I found a hair sample that was analysed by Hans Brunner, who did the Dingo baby case, and he said, yes, it's an unknown species. I had a primatologist, 2 primatologists, one Colin Grove, but also David Chivers from Cambridge. He said, yes, it's definitely an unknown species. They were prepared to stick their necks out, and Brunner got loads of grief from the scientific establishment for doing that, saying, why are you doing it? You're going to be regarded as a nutter. He said, because I believe in it. You can see the slides on the website. Anybody can see that there's a difference. Yeah? And in the future, I've got a chap called Todd Disotell in America who works for New York State, and he's completely respected independent scientist. And his attitude is, look, Adam, I'll work with you. They can't kick me out because I've got an internship, but and if I do analyse your stuff, I'll say so. If it's something unusual, I will say so, and I'll stick my neck out publicly. If not, then I will say that too. And both Tom and I get on really well. I've worked with him on National Geographic before. Great bloke. So yes, I'm nearly there. In Sumatra, in 2 weeks' time, I'll try my best to get nearly there. I've got scientific backing now, so we've made big advances. Yes, Richard.
Cheers. As a zoologist myself, looking at Michele and Bambe, it seems to me the thing that makes the most sense is some sort of giant semi-aquatic varanid. Have you considered that possibility?
Yeah, I think I can't make up my mind because some of the evidence and some of the questions almost seems contradictory about how it behaves. As I said to you, the only single thing that I can be sure of is that I'm pretty sure it exists. And what I want to do is I want to go to Michele and other lakes to try and gather some evidence. It's not like we've had evidence with, say, for example, Sumatra that we've just talked about, or even the Bigfoot stuff. We've got very, very little that anybody can actually analyse. So far, what we've got is eyewitness reports, and that's about it, really. And maybe a couple of footprints, possibly, that people have talked about before, but there's very little evidence. Though, as I say, those videos, I doubt anybody's ever seen anything like that before today.
Also, there can be more than one animal. They also talk about the creature called a melanotopia, the killer of elephants, which does sound like a rhino.
Yeah, they do, but with here, I was very specific to ask about Michele and Member and what Michele and Member looked like. And I talked about other mystical animals that it could be, and talked about other things. But I wanted to focus particularly on that. And they were very specific in their descriptions of what Michele and Member looked like, as opposed to any other cryptids. I'll just ask that gentleman back, if I may. Yes.
Yeah, people were talking about sauropods being comparatively primitive, but I was in of all places the south of France, where they've got a lot more digs opening up, mostly of preserved eggs of these titanosaurs, which are the last of the sauropods right at the end of the Cretaceous period. They're kind of smaller, like bus size rather than whale size. And they find some extraordinary things. They found one called Ampelosaurus, the vineyard lizard, they found in the vineyard, which appears to have spikes on its back and bony plates on its back. So I think sauropods may throw up some surprises in terms of how they were around, how sophisticated they were.
Well, the one thing that you'll find, the one thing that the difficulty that we face is that any major discovery, or when you're trying to do any discovery, it's always treated with scepticism. People are always, it's so easy to knock what we're doing, and it's only by sticking your neck out that you'll ever get anything. That's why it's been, your question in the front, the gentleman in the front, was really important. It's taken me years to even get credible scientists to even stand up and be counted. It's taken years of perseverance. But we don't know an awful lot. That's what people assume that because they read the media and they see all these things that they know everything already about all of these different animals. They actually know. We don't know. There's so much we don't know. I know people like you who believe that, but most people think it's all been discovered. It's all been discovered, and they're really wrong. And we owe it to the ones that haven't been scientifically proved. Because I really believe when I went to Mongolia last year, to add to what Gregory was saying, I really believe there's a breeding population, without going into too much detail, of a couple of hundred of these llamas living in the mountains there, and I really believe that within my lifetime they'll all be gone, for a number of reasons. Yes, you've got the mic.
Yes, I've got the microphone.
Oh no, he's got a microphone.
Bad enough without one. You mentioned earlier that on expeditions you'd occasionally suffer sort of various physical discomforts, illnesses, things of that nature. You needn't worry about this at all, because Richard Freeman, when he goes, always contracts something absolutely diabolical. I wonder that the man has ever ventured after these expeditions east of Basingstoke, and his ingestion of fermented camel's milk on the Mongolian expedition was particularly unwise, I've always felt. But I think everybody knows that on an expedition you are going to have discomforts. That's why a physical wreck such as I tends to eschew them. I like to read about other people's discomforts, not to undergo them myself. Well, the more uncomfortable they get, the more vicarious delight I take in knowing that they are getting their insides eaten by some worm that has got into them, and I am not.
Well, let me tell you, in answer to your question very quickly, yes, you can go, we can sort it out for you. If I can arrange a trip for you to go to Mongolia, the worst you're going to get is pirates. The worst thing I ever heard, about illnesses, I had a zoologist with me one time in the Congo, and something laid its eggs on one of the Royal Marines I was there. And he said, that's going to go behind your eye in 5 years and pop out, and you might go blind, don't worry about it. And the guy sat there going, oh great! 5 years, and then I'll lose my eye. But it depends where you go. I've had bits of me drop off, but I'm happy to say I'm now healed. And I've had every blood test known to modern man. There isn't anything wrong with me, because I know I've been tested for it all. Believe me, when I come back, the people at Monsul, they love lining up the vials for the blood. I see this tropical disease man, like, grinning with delight, because I'm a keen patient. So, some of you will suffer, but if you don't do these things, you'll remember anything you do. If you go on one of these things, you will remember it for the rest of your life. And if you don't suffer, it's not worth doing sometimes, is it, really?
No paper that game. This is the dropped off free row.
I have no artificial bits. I'm in good muster. But I don't think I'm going to discuss that with you anymore. Gregory.
Please, some words about another cryptids of pond, and the second part of this question: are there some large cryptids? Maybe Makimbembe is the history of Makimbembe is the history of two cryptids, because with such head, neck, and body, there is impossible to be elephant killer.
I think the Makimbembe. I focused on the Makimbembe when I was in the Congo, because that was the one I'd always wanted to do since I was a boy, since I was a teenager. I'd always wanted to look at the Makimbembe, and it was always my thing that I was interested in. I think when they get the descriptions that I quoted to you, I think that's the tribal person doing his best to relate what an animal, parts of an animal might look like to somebody from the West. Don't dwell too much on the physical specifics as described. It's more about the character of the animal that's described, and generally, it's a relation to rather than a specific description of a body part.
Any other questions?
Just to touch on that last point you just made, something I don't know the Mumbai literature. How many first-hand reports actually are there of this creature in entirety from all the different people who've been out there? And I think I could ask another question as well, based on what you just said. Is it possible to get is it possible to get discrete kind of eyewitness testimony like we get perhaps in Europe? Or is it kind of amalgam of folk belief and people's personal experience?
This is a good question. I mean, I'll break it down into two parts here. The second bit interests me most. As I say, I do cross-examination for a living. Yes, it's possible to get discrete eyewitness testimony. That's what I do when I go out and analyse it, because I'm spending a lot of my own time, my own money, sometimes I'm risking my life. I don't want to be looking about with somebody who I think is making things up. So yes. Do you have to, in terms of other people who've been out there, you have to be very, very careful. Richard, John and I, and other people, Chris is in the audience, Gregory, we really, really are careful that anything we say is completely genuine and is also, where possible, scientifically substantiated. Not everybody who's been to Tele, who says they've been to Tele, have been to Tele. So, but eyewitness reports are extremely important, and after scientific evidence, they're second on the list for me. No, nobody's done that.
Any other questions?
Definitely, it's something worth doing. As I say, my primary interest is field research. That's what I get a buzz of. People like Carl Schuker will do a lot of the and Richard and John will do a lot of the academic listening. I know Richard John go out as well. But I'm more interested in gathering the evidence to be analysed rather than doing the analysation.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I can do the analysation.
Yeah, totally. You've got a niche, mate. You've got a niche. Yes.
Is that microphone working? Okay, Dan, sorry, you have to do the plan.
How do you ask the locals if they know what properties of the animal look like?
No, I didn't talk a lot about scout. I think it was when I went to the Congo. It was a learning process for me. All of this is a learning process as you go along. Well, the first couple of times I went to the Congo, I was more interested in the physical descriptions and gathering evidence than asking about that. No, it's the short answer. I didn't. Should I have done? Yes, but I didn't analyse it. Yeah, totally.
About what it's eating and the structure of its guts, which will tell you quite a lot about what sort of animal it is. Is it a cow-like herbivore, front-gut fermenter, rear-gut fermenter, what?
I agree with you. I should have done it, but as I say, it's a learning process for me. When I go back, it'll be one of the things I ask. Yes, absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you guys, but I'm always humbled when I hear some of the stuff which Adam's done over the years. It's a great privilege to have had him here, old friends, and I'm sure he'll be back again. Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Davies.